Welcome to the Jung Anthology Podcast from the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago. Healing Cinema, The Lives of Others. In this episode, Jungian analysts Judith Cooper and Daniel Ross discuss Florian Heckle von Donnersmarck's 2006 film, The Lives of Others. Sorry it's been over 3 weeks since our last episode. We're trying to stick to the 2-week schedule, but I've just been really busy. We're going to jump right in, but I just want to say you can support this free podcast by becoming a member of the Institute, making a purchase in our online store, or making a donation to the Institute. Oh, also spoiler warning, they definitely talk about how the movie resolves, so if you have not seen it and you do want to see it before listening to the episode, go ahead and do that. That being said, let's jump right in.
This film, Lives of Others, 2006, won the Academy Award in 2007 for Best Foreign Film.
I saw that. And I think what's his name? Wiesler, the actor who played him, won also, didn't he? Did you see
I'm
that?
not sure. I don't know. I didn't come across that. I think he did actually now, Dan, that you're saying it. What an actor. What an actor. I mean,
I thought that was brilliant. Brilliant.
Superb. Of course, the screenplay isn't bad either, but wow. Yeah, and the director-writer has that very florid name. Florian Heckle von Donnersmarck.
Very good.
It's a mouthful.
I was hoping you would be able to pronounce it. I'm very impressed. And apparently that's his debut film.
Yes.
Quite remarkable.
Yes.
I love this film.
Me too.
Each time I watch it, I get something else out of it.
Yes. Yep. Like a fine bottle of wine or a piece of classical music.
Yeah, and I was just reading something Murray Stein had written just about stories in general, and the good stories, and we apply this to film. They keep around because they have something to bear, something new to bear over and over again, right?
It's the gift that keeps on giving in the best sense.
Yes, that's right. Okay, this is our Wikipedia summary. In 1983, East Berlin dedicated Stasi officer Gerd Wiesler, played by Ulrich Mühe, doubting that a famous playwright, Sebastian Cook, is loyal to the Communist Party, receives approval to spy on the man and his actress lover, Christa Maria, played by Martina Gedeck. Wiesler becomes unexpectedly sympathetic to the couple, then faces conflicting loyalties when his superior takes a liking to Christa Maria and orders Wiesler to get the playwright out of the way.
Okay, that starts us off. I mean, it doesn't.
It's a start. It really doesn't get to.
No. And actually, they get that a little bit wrong. I think he doesn't gain approval. He actually volunteers. He does. Because that's already, he's hooked by the playwright. First meeting, right?
First meeting, yeah.
He sees him as shadow at first. He says that enemies of the state are arrogant, and he sees this artist as arrogant.
Yes. And that's when he first sees him at the play, right?
Right.
When he's watching the play and then watching him. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he's got this laser focus on him, constantly looking at him through his binoculars. We should say, though, I think that this takes place in East Germany before the wall falls. And the film opens up with some data that's very important. This is the socialist state, the German Democratic Republic, created after the war and Hitler's defeat. And the words are in the intro. It opens up with the Stasi, like you said, the secret police. They employ 100,000 people to control people. And not only that, 200,000 informers. And I think importantly, the declared goal, this is the intro, on the screen. The declared goal of the state is to know everything. Right away, we've got a major inflation here, right?
Yes. To know everything. And you know what, Dick, it sparked to me was the dark eros, the Sadian, consciousness, as Thomas More talks about, that Sadian consciousness is around knowing everything, knowing something inside and out. And that in itself is, its darkness comes from its penetration. It's needing to know, and needing to know that destroys that which you need to know, right? Or cuts it, or he talks about the archetype of the Sadian in contrast with the innocent, the naive, and I think those are the polarities, or two of the polarities that are going on here. If we look at the state and its need to know, and this construction as this, as you described, thousands and thousands of people that just have to know everything that's going on in people's lives, has a sadistic quality to it.
It does. It's like uncontrolled, uncontained power.
Yes.
And of course, you're bringing in innocence is right on, because Christa Marie is an embodiment of innocence. She's like a Persephone.
She is.
That gets abducted and pulled into the underworld.
She does.
By the minister that tries to have a sexual affair. Minister Hempf, right.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, but the other innocence here, which is, each time I saw this bond between Drayman, the playwright, and Weisler, the Stasi captain, there's some type of bond going on there, right? I think
there is.
You suggested that Weisler was in love with Drayman. Right, that there was a love there, and then Weisler or Drayman eventually finds out by the end of the film who this guy was that was protecting him all this time. But Drayman is naive.
Yeah, they're actually. I would agree. They're all naive. They all undergo, except maybe Christa Marie. They all both the main two men characters undergo a disillusionment process throughout the film. That's what's driving the narrative, the whole disobedience of their innocence and naivete.
Isn't it beautiful?
It is.
When I asked, I was going with Beebe's, John Beebe said, you can look at a film and see it as one person's constellation of complexes, right? And each character plays a different portion, a different complex. But here we have a dual protagonist, really, because it's not only Weisler. You can look at the film from that point of view, but also Drayman, and there's a duality in their personalities, because I think you're right; they're each changed by the other. Right. In fact, that scene that we talked about, where cinematically, the first scene is when she gets out of the minister's car after he rapes her, essentially, and then as she's walking into the house, Drayman had seen her and then steps to the side so that he can't she can't see him, and she
Mhm.
walks up the stairs to the apartment.
Mhm.
Then in a parallel scene is when Weisler sneaks into the apartment, having found out where the typewriter is, to take the typewriter so it can't be discovered. And then he too is standing in that same spot, right?
Yes.
When
Yes.
Draymond walks in,
Yes.
which is a very clever way of bringing these two characters
Connecting them.
into the same, connecting them, and
Yeah.
a sharing of consciousness, right?
Absolutely. Yes, there's another scene where that shows up too, where Weisler is up in his perch in the attic, surveilling them, eavesdropping, and he hears them making love. And next scene is we see Weisler in his chair up in the attic, and he's curled up sleeping, had dozed off up there, but in the same position as the couple making love, that he imagines that the camera actually shows the couple in that curled up position. He's curled up alone on his chair. It's a beautiful, tender, poignant scene. So there is this kind of shadowing or repetition of embodied in the body in space.
Yeah.
That connects
and it's very, very powerful because it's there's no narrative. It's transposing one image onto the other, which then connects the image in consciousness, and then connects the characters. It's almost as if you can feel Weisler taking on this new awareness, this new consciousness, this eros, just by the use of transposing these images.
Yes, it mirrors Jung's idea of the conjunctio, the psychological union of opposites, that the interpersonal connection with someone can trigger, like within an analyst in analysis, can trigger an intrapsychic union. It actually promotes the change and growth, and that's what we watch Weisler go. Well, all the characters go through, except of course the woman is sacrificed at the end. She, spoiler alert, she dies in the end. Very tragic.
She is. Which makes her not a person, but a Anima character, Anima figure, without the dimensionality that some of the other characters have. I would challenge you that as I think about these characters, the only two characters that really change are the two men, the Weisler and Draymond. I think the other ones are there archetypally, and they're not really full-blooded people that are meant to show change. Tell me if.
Yeah, I would agree with that. She could die because she was internalized by specifically Weisler. I think Draymond was more evolved. That's the beauty of this character, Weisler. In subsequent watchings, I realized that it's as if he goes from no anima development. He has no relationships with women except for the prostitute, scene with the prostitute, up through Jung's stages of anima development, through Eve, the body, Helen, the erotic object, Mary, the compassionate witnesser, to almost the wisdom, the highest level, and even, I would argue, an anima mundi, where he's incorporated the soul of the world, given how he is acting in the world. So she can leave the stage, so to speak, through death, because he has internalized all of that development, like within like a space of whatever time frame is going on in the movie. It's not very long, but we watch that incredible development. It's just like he was ready to be changed.
Yes.
by that engagement with the feminine.
Yeah. Well,
And-
that's beautifully put. And that this relation, and that was the idea of Jung's concept of the anima, right? It connected us to the unconscious, mediated for us, and the unconscious bears the opportunity for change.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays that out.
Yeah, beautifully. I mean, the introverted feeling, you just connect with how it's so internal. And when the one tear falls down his face, when Drymon plays the music, sonata for a good man, it's devastating. You feel right along with him. And I think what I realized too, not just the anima development of Wiesler, but the anima, as a female viewer, I could appreciate the animus development in me. Now, let's just say for our listening audience, the conscious sexual other, the anima animus that Jung developed theories around as a construct, as a psychological construct, was, again, the opposite sex is so the man has a feminine inside, the anima, Jung says, and the woman has a male part of her called the animus. And as a female viewer, I could feel held by watching my animus and projected onto Wiesler change from kind of a tyrannical figure, full of power, to a very tender feeling man.
Yes.
Which affected me in terms of my own animus development. So it's a very powerful film in that regard.
That is beautiful. You know, there is this sense that I think we talked about this for me, that Christa, you know, the name of course conjures up Christ. Christ as the Redeemer, right? She is the one sacrificed. That the relationship, if we see it as Drayman's innocence and his perhaps his idealism, and perhaps his naive idealism, which creates a one-sidedness, that in him had to die off. But the whole film seems to revolve around, for me, the image of the good man, which comes up often in the dialogue.
It does.
I think that inspires Wiesler, as it inspired the other men in the story. The image of the good man. You know, the beginning play. When I go back and it's the brief scene that's there. I don't know what the rest of the play is about, but if you just look at that scene, she says Arthur is dead, and I took that, and if I looked up the etymology of Arthur, it means warrior king. And if we take that as the death of the patriarchy that inspired Odysseus, or the Odyssey, that inspired the Aeneid, all of the culture and literature around the father, and how that evolved through cultures in different times, and then the collapse of that at some point. You know, whenever you want to say that has happened. Here we have a construction of a dictatorship that is not the patriarchy that we knew of ancient times. It's not the father image of the good man, and so it becomes a substitute. And simply an abuse of power. as evidenced by that type of government and the Stasi and the use of the Stasi as. Does that make sense? That this,
it does. It
and
does.
you're right. Weisler carries all of this, and this movement from, he too was, I think, stuck in this, imagining that the father is made up of the sword and the shield, which was the image of the Stasi, right? That they were to be the sword and the shield, which conjures up the old patriarchy in terms of the father image as being protective and so forth. But it's been distorted. And I think Weisler discovers the distortion and the abuse and in his observing these people.
Yeah, they the references to good and bad are all through the film. It's really interesting. They the music, Sonata for a Good Man, the bar scene, the encounter in the bar between Weisler and Krista, where he tries to convince her to not go meet the minister in their sexual rendezvous. He talks to her and she tells him, "You are a good man." And then the little boy in the elevator, where he's beginning to change. Weisler is beginning to, as Grubitz says to him, his superior, "Whose side are you on?" He's beginning to go to the other side. And the little boy says, are you a member of the Stasi? He looks down at the boy and says, "Do you even know what they are?" And the little boy says, "Well, my father says they put bad men in prison." The moral?
No, and it's interesting. He says that they're bad men that put. I don't know if he says good men in prison, but
no,
the Stasi's bad men that put men in prison. Right?
Yes. Bad. Yes, right. Yeah. Bad men in prison. So the what's morally right and ethically right is all through this film. And the fact that the book that Draiman writes about Weisler in the end is he takes from the title of the music, Sonata for a Good Man, and Weisler identifies himself with that good man because he became a good man.
Yeah.
And when we talked about this before, I brought in the Erich Neumann book on depth psychology and a new ethic. Where he differentiates between the old ethic and the new ethic, and it kind of lines up well with this film in terms of the old ethic being a cultural authority that becomes oppressive and the individual is sublimated for the good of the group. And then someone with a new ethic, which is what Weisler has in the end, which is he's following his inner voice and disregard and separating from the collective in a way that he follows his own right behavior. In the end, it's just so beautiful.
And his face is so in one way difficult to read, in other ways very transparent, and it's really interesting because you really see everything that's happening from his face, and the struggle that he has. I mean, after he finds out about the writing of the essay and their plans to send it to the West, to publish in the West, he gathers all that and is going to Grubitz's office to tell him, right? Yes. And then Grubitz starts talking about how this scientific paper that he read about how they keep writers in particular in jail for 10 months or something like that, and they keep them in seclusion, isolation, and then they lose all desire to write. And as soon as he hears this, he realizes he can't tell him. He can't destroy
He's
this man.
disgusted by the pettiness of all of that in some way. He's just disgusted. That was beautiful because that showed to me the variability of complexes. He got taken over in that moment by, okay, I'm going to, he had been falsifying records to help Dryman be out of love for both of them. And then Dryman goes too far. And so he said, okay, I'm gonna out him. Weisler thinks, okay, I'm gonna expose him to my superior. I like to call him Grubbits.
Grubbits, yeah.
Grubbits.
Yeah, that's a good name for him.
Yeah. And then he changes his mind because he realizes he can't betray his love object, basically, Dryman, for these petty BS guys that are so full of ego inflation that he's kind of disgusted by them. But you bring up a wonderful point about his face. This actor is just amazing, because that scene, every time I watch it, I just get so moved. At some point, Weisler goes into Dryman's apartment and steals the book by Bertolt Brecht. And there's a beautiful scene of Weisler. He's being, he's on the other side already. He's so identified with Dryman and Christa Marie, and he's on the sofa, laying down, reading the Brecht book. And we hear what he's reading on the voiceover. And it's this gorgeous poem about loss and holding a love object, and his face looks completely different. It's like he looks so softened and human, whereas before he looked like a robot. Inhuman. And his face, just by virtue of that, of what he was feeling internally, we see it on his face.
We can see it.
And that's, it's like how sometimes we can see people and they look so different, or we look in the mirror and we can look so different. And I think it's so dependent on what we're feeling inside. That was just a gorgeous scene.
Well, and that's the difference between cinema and theater, because that he couldn't have done that in theater, right?
Yeah.
His face so close on screen, the camera so close, showing his face. What he doesn't amplify in his face then is amplified in us, right? We might even see him smile a little. And each time I saw the film over and over again, I'm going, oh, this, and it was very subtle. These changes in his
very
face.
Subtle.
You can see what pleased him and what displeased him. Right?
Yes. Very, very subtle. You're right.
Yes.
The other time he said the use of good and bad is when he comes up to he had this encounter with Christa Marie in the bar, and he doesn't know what happens until he gets into the attic the next morning and he reads the report that the assistant had written. And he doesn't even turn to the guy, he just reads the report. You know that he is elated because he had an effect on Christa Marie. And he reads the report and he says, just under his breath almost, good report. And the man is flummoxed because Weisler has never said any praise to anybody. And so again, but it's so subtle. His face is so, you're right. And that's, I mean, for analysts, when we really try to catch these bodily indications of what's going on inside, we're trained to we try to be trained to, we try to be aware of those bodily shifts in people. Now it's harder on Zoom, right? But yeah, that was just gorgeous, his acting.
Yeah, it's beautiful to see his transformation behind that face. Because it's not too much, and when you see an actor giving too much, giving way too much, or giving it really is distracting and really I think it has a different effect on the audience.
Well, in theater,
you
they
know.
call that scenery chewing. Yeah, yeah,
I
and of
like
course
that.
it can be on the screen too.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah,
think probably a lot of people like that, shoot 'em up, kind of, over the
yeah,
top, hyperbolic,
yeah,
just crazed, outsized effects. But for me personally, I don't get off on that. It's
yeah, yeah,
it's the subtle nuances that reverberate in us.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thinking about that scene where he is, so going back to the father image,
Mm,
Whistler is evolving this archetypal father, right? Because all the fathers are distorted in this film, meaning they're dictators. They're really
mhm.
not fathers.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're adolescents,
Yeah.
and so he acts Whistler in that bar scene. He takes action and is trying to father her, right? Trying to move her towards doing the right thing,
Yes.
towards um, helping her to realize herself, her purpose, her role,
Right.
the effect that she has on the community, the culture, the art, the value of art, all in that one scene. And she's inspired
She
by
is.
that.
She is, and it's actually he uses the same words that he overheard Dryman use to her. You are a great artist.
Yeah.
I think that bar scene is amazing. Yes, he is acting like a supportive, good father. It was like a therapeutic encounter. He
Mhm.
sits opposite her and he points out to her when she's being inauthentic.
Mhm.
And he says to her something like, well, right there, when you said that, you're going off to meet a friend. You weren't your true
You
self.
yourself. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so it's like what an analyst does.
Yeah.
It mirrors back what he's feeling is in her. And also the whole idea of he's going to, when he's up in the attic and he manipulates the wire taps so that, Dryman can hear the door buzzer and be
Yeah.
exposed to Krista Marie getting out of the limousine with the minister Hemph, who's, trying to draw her into the underworld. He calls it's time for bitter truths.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
that's also what analysts do. We say
Yes.
things that people don't want to hear.
Yes.
And so I thought there was just this interesting parallels in these ways with that role that we take on. I saw myself in that with what Weisler was doing. I think he was, his motivation at that point was, I think, out of love. I would
I
say
think
out
you're
of
right.
love.
I think you're right about that. That his initial, he had this initial attraction to Draymond when he saw him. Perhaps attraction to his life, or he recognized his inflation, his arrogance, and then wanted to study him. Is essentially why
Yes.
he volunteered to do that.
Uh-huh.
But the other thing I was thinking about, if we look at the archetypes from the puer perspective, if Draymond is carrying the puer energy, the innocence, he doesn't want to know what's going on with the study. He doesn't want to know all the things that this group are, and particularly the director that commits suicide,
Yes.
particularly what he's going through, and he doesn't want to see all this,
Right.
But Weisler knows all this stuff. He's carrying all this. He's like the Senex, and the fact that he's attracted to rules and regulations,
Right. Yeah.
is very Senex. So it's like the attraction of opposites here, and that each again is changed by the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Weisler has changed in a way that he perhaps didn't expect.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
But the beauty of it is that he just despises the guy at first, enemies of the state are arrogant and artists are arrogant.
Yeah.
And then the love comes so quickly. It's almost instantaneous. I would say that they're alike. I agree. The cynics and the puer are opposite there, the way you're describing. I think they're alike because they both have idealized the state.
Yeah.
And that's where their disillusionment, both of them, comes in. And so they're aligned in that way.
Yeah.
They both believe in the socialist state and there's a lot of meaning in what they're doing, both of them, even though Draiman is surrounded by friends that keep telling him, wake up here, being naive.
Right.
I think, yeah.
Go ahead. No, I was going to just add that Draiman had idealized the state, but hated the men. His comment about Hemp was that he shouldn't even be, he's not even good enough to address you, or something like that. In the beginning, do you remember that, where Hemp gets to go to the microphone and
at the party, at the celebration party, yes. So
he hates the men, but he does idealize the state and ignores the ramifications of the dictatorship that's going on.
Right, yeah. I had a thought too about the kind of wordplay on the title of the film, Lives of Others. Did you think about that? It made me think of not just the outer others, but the inner others. And just the phrase, the lives of others, to me, carries with it some, I thought of Jung's idea of how the parts of us internally have an autonomy.
Synchronistically, I had to my side my presentation from this weekend, and there's one slide that I included in there about the transcendent function. This is Jung speaking to the other in just the way you're describing it. So I'm going to read it, this quote. It was in the essay on the transcendent function. The present day shows with appalling clarity how little able people are to let the other man's argument count, although this capacity is a fundamental and indispensable condition for any human community. Everyone who proposes to come to terms with himself must reckon with this basic problem. For to the degree that he does not admit the validity of the other person, he denies the other within himself the right to exist, and vice versa. The capacity for inner dialogue is a touchstone for outer objectivity. He's speaking to this otherness, as you said. It's not just the other out there, but it's the other within me. And that if I objectify or if I project shadow onto the other there, I'm not owning the other in me.
Right. It's got huge, that's great, Dan. It's got huge ramifications now, right, for the state of the country.
It really does.
Polarization that we're all going through. I remember I was at a conference once. This was when, this was, I think, right before the Iraqi war, after 9/11, and this presenter wanted all the attendees to try to connect with their inner Bush, their inner President Bush, and nobody could do it. I mean, Bush was as president after 9/11, he was hated. And so nobody could go there into that shadow realm. And that's what Jung is saying. That's what we need to do to heal these splits.
Yes, absolutely.
I thought that, go ahead.
So just to punctuate that, that the title, to me, is very relevant. I was thinking, is this a film that could be done in America? This is a German film that with a great deal, not just history, but a great deal of what's the word? Rootedness, and oldness to it. Where I don't know if this film could be done in America in quite the same way, right? it's just this feel that this idea that well, let's take Hitchcock, for example. We thought when we presented on Rear Window, we were thinking of the theme of the voyeurism, right? And yes, there's a similar theme of voyeurism, but this is a completely different film. This is about a man whose voyeurism really led to transformation.
Right.
And in Rear Window, we don't see any transformation. We don't see any change. We don't see the same depth.
Right.
The character that we see in this film. Does that make sense?
It does, but you're saying it's predicated on the nationality, where it's taking place. I don't know.
It's Europe. Europe is older. Something about America's youth still, I think, comes through in some films, in foreign films sometimes.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I think we were saying earlier when we met that the voyeurism has a completely different effect, and I think that instead of being in the service of defensiveness, like for Jimmy Stewart's character in Rear Window, and just what else? The defensiveness, distraction,
Right.
This is all about stimulating it is all about transformation and stimulating the imagination. He imagined himself part of this couple, and I want to read a quote about the imagination that I found that I think is beautiful. This is from an article on the Anima Animus, and he's arguing for the power, which of course Jung's psychology has been called the psychology of the imagination. And so he's talking about the power of imagination and its role in transformational processes, like active imagination. So this is by a man named Zinkin, in a book called Gender and Soul in Psychotherapy. The human being is above all not only a social, but an imaginative being. And despite our seemingly infinite capacity to redefine ourselves, it is through our imagination, our ability to imagine what it is like to be the other, and mirrors what you just said about the transcendent function. Our ability to imagine what it is like to be the other and to be part of the relationship with the other, that we attain a sense of being more than we are. In this way, our very limitations are also our strengths. Woo. I mean, it actually contributes, if we allow ourselves to imagine another life. If we're drawn to it, or even if if we're not, and this brings up a quote by Jung that I want to bring in here, it fuels more of who we become. And that mirrors Jung's phenomenal first line in his volume 14, Mysterium, where he says, let me get it exactly because it's really an important quote. Well, but you know the quote: the factors that come together in the conjunctio, in the union, are conceived of as opposites, either confronting one another in enmity, in hatred, or attracting one another in love.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
do we
beautiful.
have to continue? Yeah. I mean, is there any more to be said? But no, but that was so, in the film, we see the enmity initially, and then it almost immediately gets transformed into love.
Yes, absolutely.
And
then you see the transformation that takes place. You see the change in the personality. Yeah. That's a great quote.
And it stimulates the viewer. I Googled, I don't know what I was Googling, but I must have been Googling Lives of Others Jungian. You never know what's out there.
You never know what's out there.
I need all the help I can get. But what came up was these political statements. People have used this film, politicians, to talk about what needs to happen. Like France's president, Macron, or no, it was maybe a president before current president. But they reference this film because that's the power of this film in terms of its work on the viewer.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm hoping this podcast it gets people interested in viewing it if they haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's available on Netflix. I know it's available on Prime, just for the viewers. And again, well, I think they're learning that they can, if they want to see the film before they listen to the podcast, they can do that.
What about the red thumbprint at the end?
Isn't that beautiful?
Close to the end, right, where Dryman realizes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
In one image, he realizes.
Yes, right.
Who this HW.
Yes, HGG or
HGW.
No, would it be HGW? Whatever the initials are of his.
Right.
Yeah.
And asked who that was. He realizes all it was because he was trying to figure out, because he thought that she got rid of the typewriter, but she couldn't figure out from the timing as he was putting together how she could do that. And it was as he was piecing things together, he's realizing she couldn't. So when he saw the red fingerprint, he realized, oh, it was this guy, whoever that was.
Yes, whoever that was. And of course he finds out who it is. And
it's so interesting that these two characters that affected each other so deeply, only one knew the other, right?
Up till the
didn't know Whistler,
right.
And he had very little interaction with him.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's the maybe that's the imagination piece. I don't know how that fits, but yeah, until the end or close to the end, he finds out who it is, and it got me associating with red as a socialist flag, the red communist red, and also red alchemically in terms of the final stage of transformation.
That's right, the
rubedo. Yeah.
That's a good point. The rubedo's red bloodedness, the completion of the personality. That's a good image. I also thought it is Eros and passion. I pulled from the Dark Eros, Thomas More's book. He's quoting Hillman. He says that Eros leads to soul. Eros that leads us to soul, which is which fits his film beautifully.
Yes, and the fact that thumbprints are unique. That it could be nobody else but Whistler, that Dryman finds him and then writes this novel about him, and he gets the novel. The last scene where he notices the poster on the bookstore, and he goes in, and the store clerk says, "Is this a gift?" And he gets to say, "No, it's for me."
Yeah. And he's got that face, right? That real subtle smile on his face.
Yeah, I mean that's how he's showing elation, but we can fill in the all the feeling that he's feeling internally. Right?
Yeah, and it allows us to feel, because he provides us with that space for that.
Yes.
The other scene of just when he's down in the dungeon with the letters that he's opening up with steam, he was relegated to because he was being punished.
Right.
When the other guy finds out that the wall came down.
Yes.
And after that, Whistler stands up and leaves.
Just loves out.
And everybody gets up and follows him. I love that. It's an image of leadership, right? He is himself, and people are following him.
Yes. And did you note the guy on the headphones was the guy that made the joke? With Grubbets.
Yeah.
He really was demoted and put in the basement.
He was demoted. Yeah.
Well. Huh. But yeah, the Drymon is transformed because there's that great line you mentioned with one of the last scenes where Drymon confronts Minister Hemph, and after the wall comes down in the theater where they're restaging his play, and Drymon says to Hemph, "To think that people like you once ruled a country." Oh,
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot about that.
yeah. It's like scenes we want to see, where, scenes we'd like to see, the final confrontation, between these two men,
Well, and yet, when we talked about it, I was thinking of the, Luigi Zoha's book on the father, the archetype of the father, the history of the father. And he divides up the father archetype in this, the biological, what he calls the biological father, that, harkens back to the horde, right? This, he doesn't know his offspring. He's there just to beat everybody, to be the alpha, to, until he's taken over and usurped, and then impregnate the females. And then how that male figure evolved into father becomes very, very important. He says, but the biological father is still there in the collective unconscious. It still captivates us, or still gets us in complex. And that's the regime we see. The Stasi is just this biological masculine alpha, get to the top, and claim the any woman that they desire. And in contrast with the spiritual father, in those two characters right at the end, that those are archetypal, right? Drayman as the spiritual image of the father, and the biological father in Hemph.
I agree. I was, as you were talking, I was thinking more in terms of Anima Animus, because the first level of development is the biological. So for the Animus, it would be images of power for women, but there's no feminine in that the way you're talking about the father image and the biological and the state. But the first level of Anima development is that it's a biological level, Eve, of the great mother and the terrible mother. And so, but there's the feminine between these two men that meet, but they're very different how they're relating to the feminine.
Absolutely. One is about claiming, and the other is about discovering. The Hemph is just about claiming what he wants, what
exploiting and using,
objectifying.
For his own power, right? For his own
power, to meet his own needs,
his own pleasure. Yeah, to meet his own needs. Yeah. Well, maybe we could end if you on that great quote of Jung's, which you also know. Let me find it. Where love rules, there is no will to power. Where power predominates, there love is lacking. The one is shadow of the other. And I think we see this beautifully in the film in terms of like way you're talking about Eros and dark Eros, and love that comes to Wiesler in love of himself, even, love of the other, love of, and the kind of an anima mundi, soul of the world connection.
Yeah, that's a great quote.
Yeah.
The opposite of love is really power.
Power, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. We are.
Have we said?
Are good.
Yeah.
Is there anything left over that you have?
Just that I love that scene when Drymon says, "Don't go," she's about to meet him because she feels forced, and she makes up this story that she's going to meet a classmate, and he says, I know where you're going, and don't go, please don't go. And you don't need, he says to her, you don't need him. And she says to him, like a good analyst, I don't, you need that, you need him too. Look at the reality here. We're both in bed with the state together. And that is just a very, very powerful. She's like a Cassandra. She's, she's like, well, she's not prophesizing, but she's naming something that he's not seeing.
Yes.
That she's seeing because she's been the one that's been raped, and so she really gets it and brings that knowledge to him so that he can understand his own reality that he's turned a blind eye to. Dan, I was reminded of, remember we talked way back about your ideas about obedience and compliance? Remember that? Yeah. That I thought of that I think you were saying that they're very different, and that compliance has some kind of that obedience is, like we say, blind obedience, whereas compliance is more maybe there's a choice there, or do you remember we talked about that?
I think I was comparing compliance with containment. And what I was realizing was the desire for parents, because I have a lot of grandchildren, so this this ubiquitous desire to make their children compliant is not containment. It doesn't allow for the child's personality to emerge. And I was seeing that in my analysis, my analytic work, that in their childhood, for example, the expectation of compliance, and I think compliance and obedience are commensurate in the way I'm using it. That it has a destruction to the self, to the developing personality, because the child is just being compliant to not be cast into oblivion, to not be abandoned, it's
adapting, need to adapt.
Well, and it's a good analogy to the film in her relationship to the state, that she thinks she needs to be compliant, and giving herself sexually to this animal, right? But compliance does not allow her personality to emerge, and her personality could emerge, and she can be herself in a relationship with Dryman, but not in the other. It's a real contrast.
Right. Yeah. Well, I hope folks will see the film. It's well worth it.
Please, everybody, see the film. And I hope we've given you something to you can use.
Something to chew on here. And
something to chew on. Thank you, Judith. As always, it's wonderful. It's exciting. It's I learn something new every time we talk about.
Me too.
So even if we've already talked about it,
there's always more. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
You take care. I'll talk to you soon.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
This podcast is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Share it all you like as long as you maintain the attribution to the speaker, but please do not change it or sell it. If you like this episode, tell your friends about us or leave us a review on iTunes. For more information about classes, training programs, videos, audio, this podcast, or to find a Jungian analyst near you, visit our website, www.jungchicago.org. Thank you to our 2020 donors who gave at the contributing member level and above: Barbara Annan, Usha and Ashok Bedi, Jackie Cabe Bryan, Eric Cooper and Judith Cooper, Kevin Davis, George J. Didier, Mary Dougherty, James Fidelibus, John Korolewski, Marty Manning, Diane Sherwood, Deborah P. Stutsman, Deborah Tobin, Alexander Wayne and Lynne Copp, Gerald Weiner, Karen West and James Taylor, and Ellen Young. If you would like to join our generous community of supporters, just go to youngchicago.org/give.